Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today because we're about to set up an exploration into one of antiquity's most famous, most recognizable, and honestly, most completely misunderstood figures. We all think we know the story of Medusa, right? We've seen her image like 1,000 times. But today, we're going to use the historical sources to completely deconstruct the myth of the Gorgon.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Monster or victim of the gods? I really want you to hold on to this question. Let it challenge literally everything you think you know about this famously terrifying creature. We're going to peel back the layers of the mythology here, and I promise you, by the end of this explainer, your whole perspective on Medusa might just be flipped entirely upside down.
If I ask you to picture Medusa right now, this is probably exactly what pops into your head. A horrifying face framed by this writhing, hissing nest of snakes for hair. And of course, her absolute deadliest weapon, right? Those eyes. Eyes that have the power to just instantly petrify men. If you looked freely at her, bam, you're solid stone right there on the spot. For generations of would-be heroes, she was the ultimate, terrifying monster.
But wait, let's step back in time for a second. Because long before the snakes and way before that petrifying gaze, she was just a mortal woman, and a deeply, deeply devout one at that. Medusa was actually a young woman who dedicated her entire life to worshiping at the temple of Athena, the powerful goddess of wisdom and war. She wasn't out lurking in some dark, creepy cave. She was peacefully tending to a holy shrine.
Now, the sequence of events that follows is just, well, it's truly tragic. As Medusa faithfully tended to Athena's shrine, Poseidon, the god of the seas and horses, was watching her. And one night, while she was praying, Poseidon crept into the temple and assaulted her. It was a horrific desecration of a sacred holy space. Obviously, Athena reacted swiftly to his violation of her shrine. But here is the incredibly cruel, heartbreaking twist of fate. Instead of punishing Poseidon, the actual perpetrator, Athena focused her terrible wrath squarely on Medusa, the victim. The young woman literally felt her body warp and transform until she became the monstrous Gorgon we all recognize today, cursed so that no man could ever freely look upon her again. Now, what's really interesting here is the tragic contrast. Fleeing her old life, Medusa sought refuge in a hidden cave. And this cave was already inhabited by the world's two other Gorgons, her sisters, Steno and Euryale. But here's the catch. While her sisters were completely immortal, they could never die. Medusa, despite her terrifying new form, remained entirely mortal. She could be killed. And so, as time went on, all these would-be heroes journeyed to this cave, hoping to make a massive name for themselves by murdering her, only to fall to her gaze every single time. And that endless cycle of guys turning into literal stone statues, that was the way of things, until one very specific young man entered the picture. His name was Perseus, and, like so many figures in Greek myth, he set out on this reckless quest for glory, with Medusa firmly in his sights as his ultimate trophy. But to understand why he went after her, we kind of need to understand exactly who Perseus was. Okay, so Perseus was born to the mortal princess Danae after Zeus impregnated her in the form of golden rain. Yeah, Greek mythology is wild. But his infancy was super bleak. Danae's father got this prophecy that his grandson would kill him, so what does he do? He locks Danae and baby Perseus in a chest and literally throws them into the sea. Safeguarded by the gods, they actually miraculously survived. But as Perseus grew up, the king of their new land, King Polydectes, lusted heavily after his mom. She kept trying to turn him away, and Perseus naturally became fiercely protective of her. So, to get Perseus out of the picture, the king sets a trap. He fakes it he's marrying someone else, and when Perseus offers him literally any wedding gift he desires, Polydectes manipulates the kid. He suggests Perseus prove his manhood by fetching a Gorgon's head. I mean, can you believe that? And Perseus naturally accepts the totally foolhardy suicide mission. So, gathering a crew, Perseus sets sail. The funny thing is, he didn't even know where the Gorgons were. His first stop was the Grey Eye. These were three ancient sisters who harbored all sorts of secrets. Now, this is a bit bizarre, but these sisters shared just one single eyeball and one single tooth among the three of them. As one sister was passing the squishy, disembodied eye to another, Perseus just ruthlessly snatches it right out of the air. He literally holds their single eye hostage to force them to reveal the location of the nymphs of the river Styx. Wild, right? Anyway, once he found the nymphs, they gave him exactly what he needed to finally locate that hidden cave of the Gorgons.
So, the absolutely crucial point here is that Perseus did not do this alone.
Just consider this incredibly unfair advantage. It's essentially a divine cheat code provided by the gods. The nymphs gave him Hermes' winged sandals, Hades' cap of invisibility, and a special satchel to hold the head. Hermes himself chipped in a gleaming sickle, and, perhaps most ironically of all, he received a shield that shone like a mirror from Athena herself. Remember her? The exact same goddess who had cursed Medusa with her monstrous form to begin with. He was heavily armed by the most powerful beings in the universe, just to fight one mortal woman. Armed to the teeth with all these gleaming divine artifacts, Perseus finally approaches the dark, hidden cave one night. And notice, he doesn't challenge her to a fair battle. Instead, he waits until Medusa falls asleep. Perseus creeps into the cave, moving totally silently toward the slumbering forms of the Gorgons. And to avoid looking at Medusa and, turning to stone, he guides his way entirely by looking at the reflections on Athena's mirror-like shield. Finally, he comes upon her, just resting peacefully in the dark.
And then, the fatal strike. He brings his sword down heavily upon her neck, beheading the sleeping mortal. But from that terrible wound, something entirely miraculous, and honestly shocking, happened. Out sprang the hybrid offspring of Medusa and Poseidon. Remember that terrible assault back in the temple? Well, from her severed neck exploded a magnificent winged horse named Pegasus, and a fully grown warrior called Chrysaor. Just boom, right out of nowhere. Now, as you can imagine, the explosive violence of that act immediately woke up Stheno and Euryale. Finding the horrific scene of their murdered sister, they attacked. Perseus quickly stuffs Medusa's head into his special satchel. He throws on the cap of invisibility, fires up those winged sandals, and makes a frantic escape. He managed to fly away entirely unscathed. The only thing that reached him as he vanished into the night was the agonizing, pained cry of despair from Euryale, just echoing endlessly through the dark cave. It's incredibly sad. So Perseus returns to the massive adulation of his crew. But the story of Medusa's power, it doesn't end with her death. See, death completely failed to dim the power of her gaze. Perseus realized the severed head remained a highly deadly weapon. He actually used it to turn King Polydectes to stone, saving his mother. Afterwards, he handed the head over to Athena. And in a final twist of profound irony, the goddess took the head of the victim she had cursed and proudly placed that terrifying visage directly onto her own shield. And this brilliantly illustrates how Medusa's image soon transcended her myth to become a massive fixture of daily life. Athena's wasn't the only shield emblazoned with Medusa's face. Ancient Greek and Roman artists obsessively committed her severed head to countless objects all across antiquity. I mean, she was everywhere. She was etched into the battle armor of soldiers, painted onto everyday ceramics, and even set beautifully into the mosaic floors of ancient homes. Let's look at how this builds, because this is a really fascinating detail. Typical ancient Greek subjects were almost always depicted in art looking cleanly off to the side, right, in profile. But Medusa was the chilling exception. She was always painted and carved, facing directly outwards. Even in death, she was locking eyes directly with the viewer, demanding to be seen. So why did they do this? Why put a monster on your floor? Well, it's because she was what historians call an apotropaic symbol. Basically, an apotropaic symbol is one that imbues both fear and protection at the exact same time. Ancient people essentially used her terrifying, unblinking face to ward off evil. They firmly believed that a monster so profoundly frightening could protect their homes, their armor, and their cities from harm. It's like fighting fire with fire. Over the centuries, though, her story kept reverberating through time, shifting and changing. While the earliest versions almost always depicted her simply as a terrifying Gorgon, later writers started to really reclaim her identity. The ancient Roman poet Ovid gave her legacy a profound shift. He wrote of her with a deeply sympathetic human backstory. To Ovid, and to the countless generations that read his work, she was remembered as a woman who had experienced immense cruelty and profound injustice, not just a simple monster existing only for some hero to slay. Which brings us to the end of our explainer today. A devout young woman is assaulted by a god, unjustly punished by a goddess, and then murdered in her sleep by a heavily armed man looking for glory. So, looking back at the myth of Medusa, how does history really decide who is the monster and who is the hero? I want you to really think about that the next time you hear a classical myth. Thank you so much for exploring this with me today. I'll catch you in the next one.